think it through. So here's the thing. If you're looking for growth principles as a pastor or a minister, if you're looking for ideas specifically for your business or for your itinerant ministry, if you're coming from here, it's actually not going to be as easy to assimilate the wisdom you need as if it comes from here. So here's the interesting thing. You can literally attract to you the strategy you need by coming from the right proclamation here faster than you can labor exponentially here in order to make something happen. And I'll prove it. I'll try. It's a mental exertion that comes from here. As one comes from here, we'll try a different one. Just to prove that it can come. This thing is real. This time we're going to do, I'll do it. Now watch where this one comes from. I'll do it. Ready? Count of three. 1, 2, 3. I'll do it! Where's it coming from? How many said it's coming from here? That's the amazing thing. As one is what God is saying. I'll do it is what the Holy Spirit's saying. Trying is not part of the equation. And you literally attract to you the strategy that is appropriate for you when you go at it from the heart first and not from the head. That makes sense? All right, high five your neighbor. Have a seat. We're going to do this quickly. Jonathan, will you please come up and help me spin the board? This is my young Padawan, Jonathan Wield, from Great Britain. Charming as ever. And we spin the board, because I was at work while we had our movie. Now, let's talk about this. Thank you very much, Jonathan. These are the two paradigms that we've experienced as a church. Let's take a look at Matthew 16 as our premise for tonight. Matthew 16. This is a ministry that has broken seals on proclamations. And I think you're perfect location to explore this a little deeper. This has been when you have competing commitments and directions. This has been part of the problem. As one is an utterance that aligns you spirit, soul, and body, but as one as a concept is what is necessary for the church to be able to have the level of impact that it has to have in culture shaping and nation transformation. This has been how we've been doing it. Because we have had individual vision, individual focus, individual ministry, individual budgets, and the only time when this goes to this is when you're desperate enough to lock shields in the arena because you know you can't do it the way you've been doing it. How have we attempted to do this? And I'm speaking from 20 years of pastoring as well. How have we attempted to do it? We have not necessarily seen the steps. I don't want to fatigue you with too much info, but here it is. Go make disciples of nations, which some people will tell us is ethnos, or ethnic group. It's fine. There's, something like 140 ethnic groups in Brooklyn. So if there's a Christian in each of those ethnic groups, their job is to make disciples out of enough in every one of those 140 districts to affect the transformation in Brooklyn. The number of ethnos that you have doesn't stop the commitment to producing nations that honor the Lord. The church has given up on nations and focused on survival. But here's the reality. You don't flip the Colosseum. You don't really win when you play holding. You have to take territory in order to survive. So the business of nations, go make disciples of nations. And that's like Matthew's Great Commission, go make disciples of nations. Dutch Sheets put this perfectly. He said, while we've been focusing on Mark's commission of preaching the gospel so that people get saved and the supernatural signs and wonders follow, the devil has been practicing Matthew's commission and discipling a nation while we were pursuing a revival. So that means that during the two most conservative presidencies you've ever had in the White House, you had the greatest progress in terms of the erosion of family, homosexuality, and the progress of abortion. Why would that happen? It's not because Christians weren't praying. Here's the problem. We were praying. But look at this. For the most part, when I was pastoring, I thought I was convinced that if the church, and you and I, we've all walked through this together. That's why it's exciting to be where we're at right now. If we could get ministers in unity, pastors in a city together, if we could get the pastors together and have them break bread and get along and pray, surely the city would fall like so many, dominoes. But then, after all the pastoral unity exercises, nothing really happened. You see, we could be more unified over here, but that's like one arrow compared to what's necessary to have critical mass to break through. If we don't see this, we're going to continue to have a challenge. Within the church arena, the local church, which is in the religion mountain. I know people don't like the word religion if you're Pentecostal or charismatic, but here's a fact. These spheres are the domain in every nation that shapes nations. And somebody in a community is articulating who God is and how that supernatural God is worshipped and manifests himself. So that's the nature of religion. And if you're in the Buddha territory, it's Buddhist. If you're in Hindu territory, it's Hindu. If you're in Islamic, it's Islam. So you have to understand that the church, though I am a believer, the church ought to be at the top of the religion mountain. Our mistake has been we thought we were every mountain. And that's the reason why we didn't have a voice that shaped policy, culture, media, entertainment. You follow me so far? Because if we catch this third Reformation wave and preach it in its generals and don't break it down to specifics, we won't have a manifestation of a nation that is saved. We'll have a nation in perpetual crises. Nations are the domain and the ultimate fruit of the kingdom. Mark's gospel is that we preach, and we got signs and wonders. Matthew's gospel, curiously enough, is teach, make disciples of nations. From where every research that I've done so far, here's what I've concluded. Preaching has the power to make an individual a disciple upon conversion. But teaching can be both covert and overt. In the overt, we teach believers, like we're doing in a meeting like this, how to become better, stronger, more resourceful overcomers in this life. But what about the covert side of teaching? Satan doesn't just come through with a pitchfork and horns and say, I'm going to mess up your families, annihilate your economy, and reduce you to a third world rubble. He doesn't say that because he's smarter than that. Covert, listen to this. Covert teaching means that you teach the principles and ideas that shape the environment so that it becomes conducive to the evangelist task of converting souls. Catch the difference. Teaching is creating an environment conducive to the advancing of the church without people knowing that you're advancing the church while you're doing it. That's why when we talk about Joseph and Daniel and these characters, we might miss the subtlety of what we're really prophesying. Joseph dressed like an Egyptian, talked like an Egyptian, he walked like an Egyptian. When he was in front of his brothers, they didn't know who he was. They didn't say, hey, you could tell that's a Jew, reminds me of my brother. When Daniel stood before 3 or 4 consecutive administrations, the first chapter of Daniel gives you the clue as to what he and his friends possessed. It was wisdom in knowing how governments operate and mastery of the language of the Chaldeans. Which means if you don't become a cultural interpreter of how to bring the kingdom of God by stealth into the kingdoms of this world, then you won't be able to accomplish what Daniel actually did, which was talk Babylonian but think like a Jew. Have the mind of Christ, supernatural, and don't tell people where you're getting your information from except as an appropriate, all honor belongs to God. But you don't tell them how you're doing what you do, because your goal is to infiltrate and, like special forces, run silent, run deep. So the church, local church, focusing here, we thought if we had revival moves of God, Pensacola, Rodney Howard Brown, if we prophesied, if we had intercession, fasting, Lou Engle, the call, all these things we've done didn't break the mind molder, the power of darkness to keep shaping a nation. You know why? Because we were focusing on the more overt and enjoyable demonstrations of the kingdom without realizing that while we did that, Satan was teaching a nation to move in the wrong direction. Now, I got a friend of mine I'm going to be seeing this week, Gordon Pennington, arguably one of the smartest guys I know. He's a former chief branding officer for Tommy Hilfiger, which means that the guy understands marketing, branding. He's an Oxford guy, and a great believer. Loves the Lord, loves the prophetic, loves this ministry. Gordon said something to me. He said, Lance, how old's your son? He met my son. You liked him? I said, 19. He said, I could go into your son's closet, into his room, and in 3 minutes, I could look at the clothes that's in the closet, the posters on the wall, the music he's listening to, the books he's reading, the games he's playing, and I'll tell you who the top 5 Madison Avenue consultants are who discipled your son while you and your wife have been praying for him to come into revival. He knows the top 5 individuals who are shaping your children while you are getting your 1 day a week, or if you're really zealous, 2 days a week in the house of God. So, this is a subject which, if we understand it, is very powerful. Religion, that's the mountain there. Family is the other mind molder that shapes culture. You got it over there. Education is another mind molder that shapes culture. We've seen this. Government, law, military shapes culture because it makes decisions on what laws are in the best interest of people. It's constantly judging what is right and wrong for the people. Media, the emergent, powerful mind molder of culture. The arts, and evidently I've got a Mormon mountain here because I got an extra one. Actually, since I like Glenn Beck, I'm not going to tell a joke anymore. Arts and business. Who can doubt the power of those, from advertising and marketing to telling you what you really want and getting you convinced that you've got to have it? Which, by the way, what is it with people that have iPhones and those? How does Apple create evangelists out of everybody? I don't know. There's not a product. There's not a product in the world I've ever seen where people go out of their way to convert you to use it. I mean, Lord help you if you're a BlackBerry person in an ocean of Apple people. I mean, they make it their agenda to enlighten you. All right, so here's the challenge. I'm saying the as one thing is going to happen, but how does it happen? It's not that we're not indispensable. I'm afraid that the church is going to be missed in this Reformation move because we're not understanding the power and the role of the church. But if we were to look at this in terms of the process, go into all the world, make disciples of nations. These are nation states. These are the final evolution of geography. No longer city-states, but nations. Where borders, like Israel has borders, that was where God was thinking. Used to be just cities, up until 1500s. It was, you were from Florence. For instance, in the New Testament, you remember where Paul would say, well, I'm of Jerusalem or I'm of Rome. They were talking about the city because the city was the city-state. It was the big deal. But the cities, as you can imagine, actually shape the nations. So if I want to talk about government, boom, Washington. How many of you know Washington has a certain amount of influence on things? Wall Street, stock exchange, business, find it in New York. If I want to go to education, I could be within 2 hours drive time of like 5 Ivy League universities: Harvard, Princeton, Yale. Well, not Princeton, Harvard, Yale, MIT. In other words, Boston. Hey, arts and media. Just had dinner the other night with like the former president of Warner Brothers. Hollywood. He lives in Beverly Hills. Arts and media, Hollywood. I mean, that might change in the future, but as far as our history goes, L.A., Los Angeles for communication, New York for power, for finance, Washington, D.C. for power. That's the nature of every nation. The concentration of force in key cities shapes the nation. Why is that important? Because that's why you see the gospel go to Ephesus, or from Jerusalem to Rome, speaking to the Colossians, to the Philippians, because those cities were the outposts that shaped the surrounding area. So how many of you are living in cities right now, or you're like you would consider yourself defined as right near within 15 minutes of a city definition? Let me see. All right. So how many of you do not live in a city? All right. So your towns or your suburbs or your communities are going to fall in specifically with the next strategy. Here we go. I'm going to put a box right there and not tell you what that is, because that's the missing piece. We come over here to this next level, from cities to nations. This is the missing piece right here. But before we get to that, we come to the house. Nations is ethnos, cities is polis. This missing piece is the koinenos, something different we haven't looked at. The house is the oikos, and this is where you get the word economics from. It has to do with your family and the family business. How you make a living and what you do for a livelihood. Because in the old days, people basically made a living around the house, doing a trade, a tanner, a carpenter. And then the final one down here is individual salvation, which is where it all starts, and that's the anthropos. I was studying some guys from Youth with a Mission who've done this research, and I'm thinking, whoa, because I'm in to understand how this stuff works. Starts with the individual, goes to the house. From the house, it can impact your town, your community, your city, because you don't have to aim at Los Angeles. You live somewhere where there's a mayor, where there's a sheriff, where there's a hospital, and there's a school. That's your 7 mountains. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, if we got the house, get your family saved, bring your employees and your business into godly principles, but we don't touch cities in North America, and we don't have a saved nation. We don't have a discipled nation. To get to there is this piece right here, the koinenos, and here's what that stands for. And it stands for institutions. That's what the 7 mountains are. They're the institutions. So the concept is that there are certain points of leverage that principalities and powers occupy, because they have in their orbit the greatest degree of influence over the minds of men. So if you've got limited resources, and the devil cannot manufacture new demons, you have to assign your princes to the territory where they have the greatest leverage. This is what fascinates me. You want to see saved nations? Nations that meet the definition of a sufficient number saved and a sufficient number influencing culture to make it for Christ rather than anti-Christ. A sheep nation versus a goat nation within your children's lifetime. To do that, to get nations saved, there's going to have to be powerful entities rise up within the centers of influence and population, where governments are located, finance is located, and the thinkers are. That's going to be your cities. But we've missed the institutions. The institution is the 7 mountains. It's the family culture. It's the religion culture in your community. It's the education culture from nursery school to college. It's the government culture from every level of municipality all the way up to the top. It's media, and it's amazing how few Christians are in media. I mean, I do surveys. I'm telling you, there's not that many people in media in the first place. Do you realize in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to be able to get on your iPhone, for you fanatics, you're going to be able to have access to a whole new level of broadcasting right there in the palm of your hand. You can pick your own program, dial in what your favorite subject is, and have it download 10-minute, 50-minute, or 30-minute vignettes from scanning a whole index of available. Television is no longer going to be controlled by a television station or by a TV set. It's actually going to be right on your computer and right on your iPhone within the next 24 to 36 months. The technology is going to be in your lap. So, media, arts, business. Here's my question. We get individuals saved. We look for our household, get them saved. We're worried about nations. Our cities have very little presence. You have a ministry here, I understand that. That is in New Jersey, that has impacted a city. Can almost tell you, in order for them to do that, they'll verify you have to have more in-reach into the diverse mind molders in your city than simply what's happening at the church. The church has to locate itself right where the gates of hell is recruiting. Which brings me to the point. Notice there's a lot of reading up here. But here's the point that I want to make. And then I want to hit this and move on, because I really feel that we can survive and take nations if we work together. I believe coming together means a whole new level of agreement and unity within geography. Locking shields means that we respect where each other actually has a measure of rule, which is honoring what is in the community. As one means that there's one overriding agenda, and it doesn't have to be based on your theology. It can be based on a shared principle or value, because the person you might be standing with maybe doesn't have the same religious persuasion as you or background. I'm around evangelicals that don't understand tongues, and I speak in tongues, but I can't make theology the common ground for that. Diamond means there's going to be an evidence of the wisdom of God and the intercession of God, creating a climate where key leaders are going to emerge, or key leaders are going to be converted within the centers of influence, and you're going to see small is the new big. The Davids that God is raising up are small in stature compared to the more prominent and better known people. But this is the key. In that hillside with David, among a few sheep, God was preparing a young man whose assignment was going to be to solve a giant national problem. You cannot determine the scope and size of your ultimate impact by the few sheep you might be working with right now. And that's why this particular message, it has to come to us first. This is an apostolic and prophetic governing type of group of people. We have to be at a level like that for breakthrough. The way that this now is starting to look as we're observing this process is, watch this. We take, in terms of where the church is locally, we have Samuel who goes, watch this, over here to a business mountain. Doesn't have to be, but that happens to be what Jesse does. He's got like a business. And one of the parts of his business has a hillside with sheep. On that hillside, Samuel anoints David. This is the importance of activating our particular tribe to understand this template. Because you and I wrestle too much with how we are going to do something. Samuel's assignment was to anoint, confirm, and convince David that David had the authority to advance into a governmental position that would seek the well-being of the nation. Your primary objective is to be able to bring into activation the emerging individuals who are going to be able to lock shields in high places and shift the environment. So when I understand that, then it gives me peace, because I understand that my assignment is I'm identifying and speaking to people for their assignment and coming alongside of them to support them in the journey. What does David do? Here's the government mountain over here, and we got Goliath. You know, he's like standing there, looking all mean. And the government mountain, we have a problem. Because we have someone in government who does not have the spiritual authority to deal with the power that is coming against the nation. So what does God do? You talk about faith. These are all it's the amazing thing. Everything we've ever taught, every truth you ever pioneered, now comes out unpacked in a holy, fresh context. And trust me, if this really is what we believe it is, a Reformation move, it redefines the application of everything you've ever done. Or it's not a paradigm shift, it's just an advance. A true paradigm shift takes you right back to zero. Doesn't make you unbelieve what you already believe. It's a fresh context for what you believe. And here's the context. The kingdom, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. What was Tim saying? On earth as it is in heaven. We've been thinking, if I could just get revival, breakthrough, the anointing, the power of God, signs and wonders, a move of God in my ministry, in my church where I am, the whole thing will change. But that never was the strategy. That never was. That worked for a season. But like the Jews who were only witnessing the Jews, at some point somebody had to come along and be controversial and introduce a new element called Gentiles. The moment that apostolic, pioneering, powerful signs and wonders, demon casting out flow that had Peter's shadow working, the moment it stepped outside of the sphere their minds were conditioned to, it produced a controversy. And they had to have a major meeting. Major conference about this, major dialogue. You know why? They weren't ready for this. When Jesus says, I have many things to share with you, but you cannot bear them, he is speaking not just to the first century church, he's speaking to every church that is alive for a paradigm shift. Because when he speaks that upgrade and that fresh utterance, it challenges every sacred tradition and expectation you ever had. And here's the mischievous thing. Just because we're a prophetic community doesn't mean we really know where the prophecy was supposed to be fulfilled. Joseph, right up to the end, in prison, is trying to negotiate his way out of his own prophecy. He doesn't realize that what he's doing is disastrous. Joseph is in prison, the butler and the baker. You guys know the story, the butler and the baker and the candlestick maker. They came to him in prison. He interprets the dream of the butler and the baker, turns to the butler, because he knows the baker ain't going to be around long, turns to the butler, and he says, hey, look, I'm in charge of this whole place, I'm administrating it, and yet I'm a Jew, I shouldn't even be here. You know me, I'm a legit guy, and I need to get out of here, and you have the influence. Now, I've helped you, remember me. The butler says, I will not forget you. And forgets him for 2 years. Now, I've been saying this lately everywhere I go. What would have happened had Joseph's prayer been answered? His prophetic royal decree, cleaving open a pathway out of prison, back to Dad's house. You talk about one dysfunctional family reunion. He only has one brother that's looking forward to seeing him. The rest of them are like, uh-oh. Dad's going to be really happy since he's been grieving and mourning because of the deception of his knucklehead sons who sold his other son and lied to him. Worse yet, while they're working with Dr. Phil to get the family straightened out, a famine hits. And there ain't no Joseph in Egypt to solve the problem. Where was the context for the fulfillment of the dream the prophet had? It was someplace other than he thought he was supposed to be. And almost all of our prophecies are envisioned in some wave of ecstatic manifestation around what we thought God called us to do within a church-related function, within a missionary function, within the fields of harvest in foreign nations. People falling down, prophesying, demons coming out. What if that's not where you're going? What if the great outrage of the week is you've been a prisoner, not of circumstances. You've been a prisoner of a prophetic process. And you can thank God he didn't deliver you by the authority of your utterances before now. Because when you show up at the right place at the right time, it's not about you. It's about the multitude you impact. Because small is the new big. Individuals are shaping the masses. So little David, little Mr. Small, God has to get him from his, well, I love this. He has to get him into the government mountain. How's he going to do it? You ready? He does it through the arts. Think about this. Favor. We talk about it. What is favor? Favor is the attraction of God to you that releases a supernatural influence through you so that other people are inclined to cooperate with you in the prophetic assignment God gave you. If you're not in alignment with your prophetic assignment, why would God want to put a supernatural charisma I mean, you don't need that. You know, and here's another thing Americans never pray: lead us not into temptation. We're always praying for, may God expand my borders and give me no pain. What we want is a painless expansion of inheritance. It's like we never stop and think, oh, I don't know if that's God. I mean, you give anybody an opportunity for media, television, or publishing, boop, they're right there, must be the Lord. Tell you, there are some promotions that are premature. This is the hour in which a lot of people held back will discover they were held back so that they can handle what they're about to step into.